Here's a famous quote about learning. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn. To reflect on the same, let me invite Mr. Vishal Dhupar, Managing Director, Asia South NVIDIA, to deliver a speech on experiential learning in the new age. He held the position of Managing Director at Symantec, former Managing Director at Autodesk, prior to which he was Director Sales at Sun Microsystems India. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome him with a huge round of applause. Involve yourself and experience the experiential learning in the new age.
Okay, good morning. It was a delight to see the students coming up here. I'm very certain that you put in a lot of effort to get ready this morning, look your best, and eventually walked up with so much of pride. And that's precisely at the backdrop of which is what I wanted to talk to you today, little realizing that you actually are well prepared for this, but since this gathering has industrialists, it has academia world, both the students and teachers, is possibly apt for me to talk about it. Now you need to bear with me because this light is absolutely blinding me. So it's possibly easier that I walk around. Yeah, actually you're right. So let's talk about what's new age about. And the moment I say new age and I talk about education, these words come into my mind. Pen, pencil, notebooks. Blackboard, chalks, duster. White, wooden scales, chairs, tables. Pretty much we're talking about classroom, but I left out two elements of that. One is the teacher, one is the student. And the reason I left that out is fundamentally because both students and the teachers are flocking together to a new evolved way of learning. It's a learning which is enriching. It's a learning which is helping people to enjoy, concentrate, focus, and do things. Now we know for a fact that in education, the moment you are educated, you're already making a mark in society and getting a status. But it's even more important that through education, we learn to think, analyze, reason it out, and communicate. And if we need to do this, the only way we can really get the education working for us is that if we truly learn to concentrate on that, and we'll only concentrate if it's enjoyable for us. Let's look at certain things that are really happening in connected world. They say this is the decade of bits and bytes. In this decade, internet is everywhere, and students are growing up in this space. Teachers are adopting to it in a larger scale. We have sessions, and I saw this in your award-winning things, that you're collaborating, you had to present, you had to basically do your homework, you got together as a team, and I can almost assure you those teams which were larger, you felt a pressure that how you could scale each other so that you could actually reach the time constraint and still without losing your anger and getting into frustrated mode, complete your projects. I can almost with assurance tell you that you learned a lot more during that phase of time than to learn in a traditional format where a teacher is just delivering you sessions. So if this is really true and this is what the current decade is all about, let's look at some of the techniques that people are using to help students as well as teachers reach the next zenith. The trends that we are seeing are around constructive learning. As the word defines, is pretty much an observation and a science of how humans learn. As humans, we learn through experience and our ability to reflect on those experiences. As we grow in life, we have certain beliefs, and with each experience, we have an ability to reflect upon that experience to know whether what we believed in, either we reject it and apply the new learning, or probably get another fresh perspective which basically deletes what we have seen altogether. Similarly, in the classrooms, what the teachers are doing is that they are helping students to get facilitated on a particular topic. What they are asking them to do is to find out what is their strategy to learn certain things. How do they basically go after their topic? So if a history subject is a mandatory thing, and I hope there are not too many followers of history here, and it's a boring subject, but if I ask you that, hey, can you make a PowerPoint slide on this? Can you give me data? Can you help us understand why this is important? You'll do your research in a collaborative way, and you possibly will start enjoying the subject. If it is political science, and if your grading is based on how do you go and debate and find out what exactly is happening in various parts of the world, you learn about the subject. Not only will you get historical inputs, but you'll also try and figure out what truly is happening around you. So this is a technique which we are seeing a lot that is getting deployed. Just like in the industry, there's another technique called JIT, just in time. And it's really been derived from Japan, and our good friend from Japan was here, but it's coming into teaching. It's a web-based tool. What it does is that before the sessions are about to start, it asks students about where does their understanding really reside. And the teacher is able to pretty much flexibly adjust the technique of how they're going to deliver the session. And the reason why this is happening because we're seeing diversification of students. Student comes from different backgrounds. Students have different levels of experience. No more is that only a 13-year-old needs to be in class 8. It could be a younger student. It could be an older student. And since there is so much of diversification, it's extremely important that we understand each person's aspect, because ultimately, if learning is understood, that learning remains with them throughout their life. Not only do they learn in classes, but they also learn as they continue to work. Technology obviously is great help. Web 2.0 brings in presentation slides, it creates podcasts, it creates different platforms where people can get unified and they talk. And even if you look at one level beyond this, people are taking help of augmented reality. Augmented reality is nothing but bringing the real life and a virtual life closer together. We saw people talking about wearable devices. They're only going to help you cultivate what you require. You blink twice, you get a fair idea about what data you want, it gets processed, and you have information that's really available to you. 3D is an immersive way. The more you can feel, the more you can touch, you feel better. The reason our craftsmanship was so good in early days, because we felt it, we touched it, we built it. If it succeeded, we were happy. If we failed, we learned lessons from there, and we did it, but we had time on hand. Today, time is essence. Knowledge needs to be displayed, so we apply technology to make it faster. What I'm going to do for you is that very rapidly, I'm going to do two examples. I'm going to take help from my colleague Shiva there. And again, because of a little bit of technology challenge, although there's a technology platform and you guys are extremely innovative, let me demonstrate you two examples pretty rapidly. This is actually a company called Z. It's based out of the US. They are big proponents of immersive technology. They believe that learning can be really done using the technology in a virtual world. Great infrastructures can be substituted if you are immersed. That's an example how a shoe basically is looked at. Anatomy needs to be discussed. You can look at the human skull. You're feeling it, you're touching it, you can rotate it. You feel as if it's really there. That's the closest that you're really getting towards the reality. It's very, very interactive. You can stop it. You can wait. You can take your time. You can go back to the net. You can do your research. Once again over it, you'll find tons and tons of material around this. And this is all about immersive technologies that help you to learn. Now, there's an architect, and I saw some awardees who are from the architecture world. Typically, when we were giving drawings, were always 2D drawings. People like me who lack imagination always struggle to figure out how my house is finally going to look like. I remember my parents building houses. It took them 2 years to do it, because every time the wall will come up, they found that there were some disruption in that, they have to break it down and rebuild it. Amount of money that would get wasted with those 3D technologies, you can figure out pretty much what you're going to get. If changes need to be made, you instinctively make that. Let's share one more example, Shiva. I know most of you are from engineering colleges here. Aerospace is a big thing. They probably ask you to model a helicopter. Once you've really simulated a helicopter, you want to also test that how does it really react to the true atmospheric pressures. It's a color-coded thing. It's telling you how the blades are rotating, how they're going to react to the atmosphere, how the wind conditions are going to make an impact on it. You can stall it, you can play around with it, and even though you couldn't afford a helicopter, you pretty much have a helicopter at almost less investment, which you can afford and play around with this whole stuff. So these were two examples, and the reason I brought this up is fundamentally to show to you now pretty rapidly what's happening in the industry part. So we'll use the academia, what you guys are learning, what the teachers are experiencing, and see what really the industry is also facing. So I'm going to take one example and build that up for you, and hopefully say that what you started learning today is going to live with you tomorrow and for your whole life. Now we know people love cars. But if you ask the automotive industry, they struggle day in and day out. If you look at it at a very high level, the consumer is asking for more value for each buck he or she spends. There's immense competition, and each time you need to keep bringing your cost and add more features. Now we know that if you add more features, which is more value, how do you justify this aspect? So if you look at just a small part of it from engineering angle and look at the workflow, you will find that there are several things which involves working. I'm going to reflect soon after I talk about this, that how it connects to your educational system. Sorry. So if you look at it, there's somebody who does a sketch. Say that, hey, this is the new model of the car that we're going to bring out. The sketch needs to then go for a design review, whether it's practical or it's not practical. There will be iterative movements, and finally our design will get frozen. Once a design is done, then we supplement surface on top of it. We test what kind of material we'll be applying, and we test the sequence of that completely. Once that is done, the components start getting inserted, so you start creating assemblies, and you figure out how do you really put all this stuff. Now I know you all understand this aspect, and just to rush through this entire thing, you realize that ultimately even crash analysis are done without the physical product being available. So you know that how the design worked all the way towards a digital prototype, how the whole digital prototype got tested, tried, and you're almost sure that if we now start making our first manufacturing products, they'll come as close to the reality. But those of you who have looked at it realize that in automotive industry, it's not only about mechanical, there's electrical. In fact, there's a change that has happened. Today, 70% of automotives are electrical, 30% are mechanical as compared to yesteryears. You know that you require people who have design faculties extremely well developed to really think about good designs, because based on good designs, fuel efficiencies comes into play, looks come into play, emotional connect comes into play. Once you have the components which fire the way it has been perceived, the whole vehicle becomes a splendor, and more splendor, the better the sales, it does good for the companies. Now, if you realize what I'm trying to say, it's collaborative. You need to understand interdiscipline. You can't just say that I'm good with my part and I'm going to concentrate on that. You absolutely can be a specialist, but you got to also reflect upon the other disciplines. The closer you work, the faster you work, the better you make, that value for your company goes up. I borrowed this actually from NASSCOM, just to reflect upon the opportunity that exists in the industry. Now we do realize in India, we are a little bit behind the manufacturing industry part, because for whatever reason, services economy for us has gone to a different level. And a lot of people who are sitting here on the first row realize this and understand the fact that why not work on our strengths? Because you can strengthen your strength and your weakness can look much lower. Now, engineering service is a great potential for our country. And across different segments of engineering, which is core to all of you, lies a great opportunity. But for India to blossom there, where we have an opportunity to have employment which is 5x of today and become a larger part of the global ecosystem, we require students who are iterative in their learning, who are constructive in their learning, those who have the experience on hand. I know for a fact that more often than not, the academia tells us, hey, you know what, we got these students, they're raw, they're ready, why don't you all deploy them, run them on internship, and finally they'll become good. Do you realize Mr. X, Mr. Y has done that and how successful they are? Again, you got to reflect on the same point which I expressed in the previous slide. I need to add value to my end customer. I can add that value if I can cut down on my cost. If I'm going to go and expense more and more time on something which you had already supposed to have learned, I am expensing some very expensive resources of mine. So it's almost obligatory on academia world to appreciate that industry requires people who are ready. Of course, you'll go through a learning process. But the learning process doesn't need to say that, hey, let's restart your learning all over again. You build on it. I find in schools today, they teach you how to gather data. They tell you that if you really need to learn geography, go walk and figure out how mapping is done. They come back, they put the data, they brainstorm on it, they analyze the data, they figure out there's certain conclusions coming and working. This is exactly what I was taught maybe 8 years after I started working. If you guys have these tools, they are your biggest asset today. Learn about those. All right, little bit of trivia. The way the computing is really moving is all about visual computing. They say pictures talk 1,000 words. The fact remains is that as human beings, we enjoy what we see, we reflect on that, we learn. Multiple industries, visual computing is becoming the way of computing. At the heart of visual computing lies the graphical processor unit, which drives the computing there. The advantage with graphic processor unit is that it gives you a flexibility to think in parallel. A simple analogy is that if I asked you to design a township, you could basically think about creating roads so that the traffic can move, and you can basically say that in next 20 years, this is the volume of traffic, so let me create roads in a particular fashion. Or you could be an advanced thinker and say that as the traffic will increase, how do I create roads in such a way that multiple problems can be solved simultaneously? Pretty much in computer science, applied to multiple domains, you need to start thinking in parallel. And GPU in combination with CUDA gives you that flexibility to think. So my encouragement is that as you are getting more and more into experimental, into realistic learning, apply parallel thinking into your mind, and you will be that much better engineer. You will be able to forecast what's required for future, and that will start differentiating you. What are we doing as a company to help you promote this? What we're trying to do is that in all your labs where you're using workstations, we are powering them on. Although typically we would recommend that use a workstation because it's industrial grade, your software works seamlessly, you're able to light up all your feature sets. The more you are equipped with that, your employment rates become better. But even if you don't have that, if you have a PC, just buy a right level graphic card, apply it there, it'll fire up all your application. The more well-versed you are with this technology, the tool that you use, the more better your position for employment. Obviously, we spoke about parallel programming. CUDA is a great vehicle around that. Lots of colleges have already adopted that. There are over 750 universities that teach CUDA across the globe. There's a high demand for computational scientists because computational scientists are able to apply their knowledge across multiple domains, and a combination of specialized domains with computer science is a great thing. So there is availability of CUDA being available to you, and we're promoting that quite a bit. And of course, collaboration. Our part is to make you aware, not because we're in a business of charity. To be very candid, we do it because if you are well equipped, it helps our cause. If it helps our cause, it helps your cause. It's a win-win situation. So we'll continue to do all this stuff, what you require to do. We would ask you to push your respective colleges, your teachers to adopt these techniques, and together we all can be very, very successful. I have a timer there, which basically says that I have pretty much done what I should have done in twice the amount of time. And I can talk a lot, but in a nutshell, I think what I have tried to deliver to you is the world is changing, it's fast-paced, it requires experiential learning. It is your learning of today that gets applied for today and for tomorrow. It's exactly the same thing that's happening in business. It's no difference. The only difference is the experience will bring you to fine-tune those attributes, but what it will not do is to inculcate new ones. So with that message, thank you very much. I hope you liked it.
It's time for Q&A, question and answer session. One question.
So what they're saying is that you can ask me a question and I can answer you over the next 15 minutes. You know, they said that Coimbatore is a hub of education, is highly organized, but there is this vibration in the people. The energy levels are so high that you can't go away from here without getting questioned. So I'm really looking forward for that question. There, ma'am.
All right, one more.
How many companies use technology? Name me one company which doesn't use technology today. Of course, there are innovative people who have carved out refrigerators in city of Gujarat without really using technology to serve a particular thing. But that's innovation, that's the need of the hour, scarcity. But technology has really facilitated the industry. I think we got to treat technology as a tool, just like how you would use physical tools to build anything. And it just helps you to facilitate that, accelerate that, and hopefully does things in a better, quicker, and in an efficient way. For several years, people have looked at technology as a difficult thing to imbibe. It's simplified, it's grown along with you. There are many miles to cover on that, but people are pretty savvy. Statistics show to me that students between the age group of 10 to 15, 65% of them are online. Majority of them have a Facebook account. Majority of us people think that they are using that to connect to their friends, to share photographs, to poke into each other. But we also realize that they're using it for their homework. We also realize they're using it for their discussions. The other day, my son tells me that, hey, my chemistry teacher asked us to solve this problem in 3 different ways. So we decided that to save time, so that we get time to play football, let's take 3 of us, we'll take one side of the problem each. Once we resolve that, we just exchange. And all being done on Facebook. That's the advantage of technology. Now, there's no harm in doing that as long as you understand what the other person did and how it looked, and you can apply that experience to yourself. I think that's the beauty of technology, and this will continue to evolve. Hopefully, I answered your question.
Thank you very much, sir. I request Mrs. Priya, Joint Secretary, Hindustan Group of Institutions, to honor the speaker. With a big round of applause, please.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. Nice to meet you again.
Thank you, Mr. Vishal Dhupar, for a thought-provoking speech.